Question 1. Strategic planning requires Anhui University of Finance and Economics to consider its future enrollment targets. In developing these plans, which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for university entrance examinations in China? Option A. Develop admission strategies that prioritize meeting enrollment quotas by adjusting examination standards or content to accommodate a predetermined number of students, regardless of their performance on the standardized exam. Option B. Design admission targets that are primarily influenced by the preferences of influential local stakeholders, potentially leading to the admission of candidates who may not meet the standard academic requirements demonstrated through the entrance exam. Option C. Implement a system where the difficulty of the entrance examination is strategically adjusted each year to ensure a consistent pass rate, thereby guaranteeing the achievement of enrollment targets without explicit consideration of the applicant's actual academic capabilities. Option D. Formulate enrollment plans that are strictly guided by the principle of meritocracy, ensuring that all strategic decisions related to admission are subservient to the integrity and fairness of the entrance examination process, in accordance with national educational regulations. Correct answer is A. Develop admission strategies that prioritize meeting enrollment quotas by adjusting examination standards or content to accommodate a predetermined number of students, regardless of their performance on the standardized exam. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's strategic goals with the ethical obligations and regulatory compliance expected of an academic institution, particularly concerning the integrity of its entrance examinations. The pressure to admit a certain number of students, potentially influenced by external factors or internal targets, can create a conflict with the principle of merit-based selection. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any strategic planning decisions do not compromise the fairness and credibility of the entrance exam process. The correct approach involves prioritizing the integrity and fairness of the entrance examination process above all else. This means that strategic planning for student admissions must be developed within the existing regulatory framework and ethical guidelines governing academic assessments in China, as applicable to Anhui University of Finance and Economics. This approach upholds the principle of meritocracy, ensures equal opportunity for all applicants, and maintains the reputation and credibility of the university. Specifically, it aligns with the spirit of national educational policies that emphasize fair competition and the selection of qualified candidates based on their academic performance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on meeting admission quotas without regard for exam integrity would be ethically and regulatorily unsound. Such an approach could lead to the admission of unqualified students, thereby undermining the academic standards of the university and potentially violating regulations that mandate fair and transparent examination processes. This would also erode public trust in the university's admission system. Another incorrect approach that involves manipulating exam difficulty or content to favor specific groups of applicants, even if perceived as beneficial for strategic enrollment targets, constitutes a serious ethical breach and a violation of examination regulations. This undermines the principle of equal opportunity and fairness and could lead to severe reputational damage and disciplinary action. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes external stakeholder pressures, such as demands from local government or industry partners for a specific student profile, over the established examination procedures and academic merit would also be unacceptable. While stakeholder engagement is important, it must not override the fundamental principles of fair assessment and regulatory compliance. The professional decision-making process for professionals in such situations should involve a thorough understanding of the relevant Chinese educational laws and regulations pertaining to university admissions and examinations. This includes consulting internal university policies and ethical codes of conduct. When faced with conflicting pressures, professionals should advocate for approaches that uphold academic integrity and fairness, and escalate concerns through appropriate channels if necessary. A commitment to transparency, impartiality, and adherence to established procedures is paramount. Question 2. Comparative studies suggest that when evaluating proposed changes to university entrance examination policies, such as those at Anhui University of Finance and Economics, the most effective approach to ensure fairness and academic integrity involves: Option A. prioritizing the reduction of administrative costs and implementation time for any new policy, assuming that efficiency inherently leads to better outcomes. Option B, relying on the subjective opinions of current faculty members regarding the perceived impact of the policy on student quality, without formal data collection. Option C, focusing exclusively on the potential for increased enrollment numbers as the primary indicator of a successful policy change. Option D, conducting a multifaceted impact assessment that analyzes potential effects on applicant diversity, examination validity, and procedural fairness, grounded in relevant Chinese educational regulations and empirical data. The correct answer is D, conducting a multifaceted impact assessment that analyzes potential effects on applicant diversity, examination validity, and procedural fairness, grounded in relevant Chinese educational regulations and empirical data. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an understanding of the specific regulatory framework governing university entrance exams in China, particularly as it pertains to Anhui University of Finance and Economics. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate method for assessing the impact of a proposed policy change on the fairness and effectiveness of the entrance examination process, ensuring compliance with national and provincial educational regulations. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both academically sound and ethically responsible, upholding the principles of meritocracy and equal opportunity. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers multiple dimensions of the proposed policy change. This includes evaluating its potential effects on the diversity of the applicant pool, the validity and reliability of the examination instruments, and the overall fairness of the selection process. Such an assessment should draw upon empirical data, expert opinion, and a thorough understanding of the relevant educational policies and guidelines issued by the Ministry of Education of the People's Republic of China and Anhui Province. This aligns with the overarching goal of ensuring that entrance examinations serve as a fair and effective mechanism for selecting qualified candidates, as mandated by national educational standards and the specific regulations governing Anhui University of Finance and Economics. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the administrative ease of implementing a new policy, neglecting its potential consequences for fairness and equity. This fails to acknowledge the regulatory obligation to ensure that entrance examinations are conducted in a just and transparent manner, as stipulated by Chinese educational law. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions without systematic data collection or analysis. This lacks the rigor required for a proper impact assessment and could lead to decisions that inadvertently disadvantage certain groups of applicants or undermine the credibility of the examination process, violating principles of evidence-based policymaking. A third incorrect approach would be to prioritize cost reduction above all other considerations, such as the potential impact on the quality of education or the accessibility of higher education for deserving students. This overlooks the ethical imperative to balance financial considerations with the broader societal goals of education and the specific mission of the university. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the objectives of the proposed policy change and its potential implications within the specific regulatory context of Chinese higher education entrance examinations. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders, gathering comprehensive data, and analyzing potential impacts across various dimensions, including fairness, validity, reliability, and accessibility. The process should involve consultation with educational experts, legal counsel familiar with Chinese educational law, and relevant university committees. Finally, decisions should be made based on a balanced consideration of all analyzed impacts, prioritizing approaches that uphold the integrity and fairness of the examination process in accordance with national and provincial regulations. Question 3. The monitoring system demonstrates that an applicant for the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam has submitted academic transcripts from a previous institution. Which of the following approaches best adheres to the university's regulatory framework for ensuring the integrity of the admissions process? Option A. Relying on a general online search to corroborate the applicant's claimed academic history. Option B. Accepting the applicant's submitted transcripts at face value, assuming their authenticity. Option C. Conducting a brief visual inspection of the submitted transcripts for obvious signs of tampering. Option D. Directly contacting the previous institution to request official confirmation of the submitted academic records. The correct answer is D. Directly contacting the previous institution to request official confirmation of the submitted academic records. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an understanding of the specific regulatory framework governing academic integrity and admissions at Anhui University of Finance and Economics, particularly concerning the verification of applicant credentials. The university's entrance exam regulations are paramount. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough verification with the efficient processing of applications, while strictly adhering to the established rules. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of cross-referencing the applicant's submitted academic records with official transcripts obtained directly from the issuing institutions. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and accuracy mandated by academic admission regulations. Specifically, Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam guidelines likely emphasize the authenticity of submitted documents as a prerequisite for admission. Direct verification from the source institution is the most reliable method to confirm the legitimacy of academic achievements, thereby upholding the integrity of the admissions process and preventing fraudulent applications. This methodical approach ensures compliance with the university's stated requirements for applicant qualifications. An incorrect approach would be to accept the applicant's self-reported academic achievements without independent verification. This fails to meet the standard of due diligence expected under academic admission regulations. Such an approach risks admitting unqualified students, undermining the academic standards of Anhui University of Finance and Economics, and potentially violating the spirit, if not the letter, of the entrance exam's integrity provisions. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on a cursory review of the submitted documents without any attempt at external validation. While seemingly efficient, this bypasses the critical step of confirming the authenticity of the information provided. The university's regulations implicitly require a robust verification process, not merely a superficial examination of paperwork. This failure to verify can lead to the admission of individuals who do not meet the established academic benchmarks, compromising the fairness and credibility of the entrance examination. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the verification process to an external, unvetted third party without establishing clear protocols or oversight. While outsourcing can be efficient, the ultimate responsibility for ensuring the integrity of the admissions process rests with the university. Without proper controls and direct oversight, the university cannot guarantee that the verification conducted by the third party meets the stringent standards required by its own entrance exam regulations. This abdication of responsibility can lead to errors or omissions that compromise the entire admissions decision. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Thoroughly understanding the specific regulatory framework and internal guidelines of Anhui University of Finance and Economics pertaining to admissions and academic integrity. 2. Prioritizing accuracy and due diligence in all verification processes. 3. Establishing clear, documented procedures for credential verification that involve direct confirmation from the source where possible. 4. Maintaining a record of all verification steps taken. 5. Escalating any discrepancies or doubts to the appropriate university authority for further review, rather than making assumptions or accepting information at face value. Question 4. Regulatory review indicates a potential security vulnerability in the handling of upcoming Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination materials, specifically concerning the secure storage and distribution protocols. An individual involved in the process becomes aware of a possibility that examination questions might have been inadvertently exposed to unauthorized personnel prior to the official examination date. What is the most appropriate course of action to uphold the integrity of the examination process according to Anhui University of Finance and Economics established guidelines? Option A. Proceed with the distribution of examination materials as scheduled, assuming the exposure is minor and unlikely to impact the overall fairness of the exam. Option B. Discreetly inform a trusted colleague to assess the extent of the potential exposure before escalating the issue. Option C. Immediately report the potential exposure to the designated Examination Oversight Committee or relevant university authority as per established protocol, ensuring no further handling of the materials until instructed. Option D. Attempt to retrieve and secure the potentially exposed materials independently without reporting the incident to avoid causing unnecessary alarm. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the potential exposure to the designated Examination Oversight Committee or relevant university authority as per established protocol, ensuring no further handling of the materials until instructed. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve favorable outcomes in a competitive entrance examination environment. Need for a fair and unbiased assessment process is paramount, and any deviation from established examination protocols can undermine the credibility of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics. The university's entrance examination regulations are designed to ensure a level playing field for all candidates, and adherence to these rules is a fundamental ethical and legal obligation for all involved in the examination process. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the established examination procedures for Anhui University of Finance and Economics, which would include ensuring all examination materials are securely stored, distributed, and collected according to the official guidelines. This approach upholds the principles of fairness, transparency, and academic integrity, which are core tenets of the university's examination framework. Specifically, the regulations likely mandate strict control over examination content to prevent any form of leakage or unauthorized access, thereby safeguarding the validity of the assessment. An incorrect approach would be to deviate from these established procedures, such as allowing early access to examination questions. This action directly violates the university's examination regulations concerning the confidentiality and security of assessment materials. Such a breach compromises the integrity of the examination, creating an unfair advantage for some candidates and disadvantaging others. Ethically, it represents a failure to uphold professional responsibility and a betrayal of the trust placed in the individual by the university and the candidates. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore a potential security lapse, as this inaction also constitutes a failure to comply with regulatory requirements for maintaining examination security and integrity. The professional decision-making process in such a situation should involve a clear understanding of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics examination regulations. When faced with a potential breach, the immediate priority is to report the incident through the designated channels as stipulated by the university's internal policies. This ensures that any issues are addressed formally and in accordance with the established procedures, preventing further compromise and allowing for appropriate investigation and remediation. Professionals must prioritize adherence to regulations and ethical conduct over any external pressures or perceived benefits of expediency. Question 5. Consider a scenario where Anhui University of Finance and Economics is approached by a prominent business conglomerate seeking to make a substantial donation to establish a new research center focused on economic policy. However, preliminary investigations reveal that the conglomerate has faced public criticism regarding its labor practices and environmental impact. The university's administration is under pressure to secure funding for new initiatives. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the ethical and regulatory expectations for a Chinese public university? Option A. Accept the donation after conducting a thorough due diligence process to ensure the donor's activities do not compromise the university's academic freedom, research integrity, or reputation, and establish clear guidelines for the research center's operations that are independent of donor influence. Option B. Accept the donation and use a portion of it to fund a public relations campaign to counter any negative perceptions of the conglomerate, thereby mitigating potential backlash. Option C. Accept the full donation immediately to address the university's pressing financial needs, with a plan to address any potential ethical concerns raised by the donor's business practices only if they become a significant public issue. Option D. Decline the donation outright without further investigation, prioritizing the avoidance of any potential reputational risk, even if it means foregoing a significant opportunity for academic advancement. The correct answer is A. Accept the donation after conducting a thorough due diligence process to ensure the donor's activities do not compromise the university's academic freedom, research integrity, or reputation, and establish clear guidelines for the research center's operations that are independent of donor influence. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate financial needs and the long-term integrity of its academic programs and reputation. The decision-maker must navigate the ethical imperative to uphold academic standards against the pressure to secure funding, which could be perceived as a short-term gain at the expense of long-term credibility. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing interests in a manner consistent with Anhui University of Finance and Economics' stated values and regulatory obligations. The correct approach involves prioritizing the academic integrity and long-term reputation of the university over immediate financial gains. This means conducting a thorough due diligence process on potential donors, ensuring that their funding does not come with strings attached that compromise academic freedom, research ethics, or the university's core mission. This approach aligns with the principles of good governance and ethical conduct expected of educational institutions, as often implicitly or explicitly guided by national educational policies and university charters in China, which emphasize the pursuit of knowledge and the public good. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on securing the largest donation without adequate scrutiny fails to uphold the university's ethical responsibilities. This could lead to reputational damage if the donor's activities are later found to be unethical or illegal, or if the funding is perceived to influence academic decisions. Such a failure would contravene the spirit of academic independence and the public trust placed in educational institutions. Another incorrect approach, which involves accepting the donation but attempting to conceal any potential conflicts of interest, is ethically unsound and potentially violates transparency requirements. This approach undermines trust among students, faculty, and the wider community, and could lead to severe repercussions if discovered. A professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a multi-stakeholder consultation, including academic committees, legal counsel, and ethics officers, to assess the potential risks and benefits of accepting a donation. A clear policy on donor relations and conflict of interest management should be established and rigorously applied. The ultimate decision should be guided by the university's mission, its commitment to academic excellence, and its adherence to relevant national regulations governing higher education and charitable giving in China. Question 6. Operational review demonstrates that the admissions process at Anhui University of Finance and Economics is experiencing significant delays, leading to candidate dissatisfaction and potential loss of qualified applicants. The admissions committee is tasked with proposing solutions to expedite processing while maintaining the integrity and fairness of the selection. Which of the following approaches best addresses this challenge within the expected operational and ethical framework of a university entrance examination? Option A. Implement a purely quantitative scoring system that assigns numerical values to every piece of information provided, disregarding any qualitative assessments or personal statements. Option B. Introduce a system where admissions officers rely more heavily on their intuition and experience to quickly assess candidates, bypassing some formal documentation checks. Option C. Develop standardized, objective evaluation rubrics for all application components, and implement a phased review system leveraging technology for initial screening and data aggregation. Option D. Reduce the number of review stages and personnel involved in the admissions process to accelerate the turnaround time, even if it means less in-depth scrutiny of each application. The correct answer is C. Develop standardized, objective evaluation rubrics for all application components, and implement a phased review system leveraging technology for initial screening and data aggregation. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for efficient administrative processes with the ethical imperative of transparency and fairness in university admissions. The pressure to streamline operations must not compromise the integrity of the selection process or lead to discriminatory practices, which are implicitly governed by principles of fairness and equal opportunity expected within the academic environment of Anhui University of Finance and Economics. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review of existing admission procedures to identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement, followed by the development of standardized, objective criteria for evaluation. This aligns with the principles of good governance and administrative fairness expected within educational institutions. By focusing on process optimization through data analysis and stakeholder consultation, the university can enhance efficiency while ensuring that the admission process remains equitable and defensible, adhering to the spirit of meritocracy and non-discrimination inherent in academic selection. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a purely quantitative scoring system without considering qualitative aspects of an application risks overlooking valuable attributes of candidates and may inadvertently disadvantage those with strong but less easily quantifiable strengths, potentially violating principles of holistic review. Introducing subjective gut feeling assessments by admissions officers without clear guidelines or oversight opens the door to unconscious bias and inconsistency, undermining the fairness and transparency of the admission process. This approach lacks the rigor and accountability required for such a critical function. Prioritizing speed of processing over thoroughness by reducing the number of review stages or personnel involved could lead to errors, oversights, and a superficial evaluation of candidates, compromising the quality of admissions and potentially leading to the selection of less suitable individuals. Professional reasoning. Professionals in university administration should adopt a structured decision-making process. This involves clearly defining the objectives of process optimization, e.g., efficiency, fairness, accuracy, identifying potential risks and ethical considerations, exploring various solutions, and evaluating them against established principles of good governance and fairness. Consultation with relevant stakeholders and adherence to any internal university policies or guidelines regarding admissions are crucial steps. The ultimate goal is to achieve operational improvements that enhance, rather than detract from, the integrity and fairness of the admissions process. Question 7. The investigation demonstrates that during the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination, a candidate was observed discreetly using a small, unauthorized electronic device to access information. According to the examination regulations of Anhui University of Finance and Economics, the use of any electronic device not explicitly permitted is strictly prohibited. Which of the following actions best upholds the integrity of the examination process? Option A. Confiscate the device and issue a warning to the candidate, allowing them to continue the examination under supervision, considering the high stakes of the entrance exam. Option B. Ignore the observation, assuming it was a minor infraction or a misunderstanding, to avoid disrupting the examination environment for other candidates. Option C. Immediately disqualify the candidate from the examination and report the incident to the examination board for further review according to the university's established disciplinary procedures. Option D. Focus on the candidate's potential academic performance and the overall difficulty of the exam, suggesting a lenient approach to the infraction. The correct answer is A. Confiscate the device and issue a warning to the candidate, allowing them to continue the examination under supervision, considering the high stakes of the entrance exam. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve favorable outcomes in a high-stakes examination environment. The university entrance exam for Anhui University of Finance and Economics is a critical juncture for aspiring students, and any deviation from established examination regulations can have severe consequences for both individuals and the institution's reputation. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and upholding the principles of fairness, honesty, and adherence to the specific examination rules set forth by Anhui University of Finance and Economics. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and strict adherence to the examination regulations of Anhui University of Finance and Economics, specifically concerning the use of external aids and prohibited materials. This approach prioritizes academic integrity by ensuring that all candidates are assessed on their own knowledge and abilities, without unfair advantage. The regulatory framework for university entrance exams in China, and by extension at Anhui University of Finance and Economics, emphasizes a standardized and equitable testing environment. Therefore, any action that circumvents these rules, such as using unauthorized electronic devices or consulting external sources, is a direct violation of these regulations and undermines the validity of the examination process. An incorrect approach would be to overlook or downplay the use of a prohibited electronic device. This failure to enforce the examination rules directly contravenes the principles of fairness and equal opportunity for all candidates. It implicitly condones academic dishonesty and can lead to a compromised assessment, potentially admitting students who have not met the required academic standards through legitimate means. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the student's perceived potential or the difficulty of the exam, rather than on the clear violation of established rules. While understanding the context of student pressure is important, it does not negate the necessity of enforcing examination regulations. The regulatory framework is designed to ensure a level playing field, and exceptions based on subjective assessments of potential or difficulty are not permissible. The professional decision-making process in such a situation should begin with a clear identification of the observed behavior and a direct comparison against the documented examination regulations of Anhui University of Finance and Economics. If a violation is confirmed, the immediate and consistent application of the prescribed disciplinary procedures is paramount. This involves reporting the incident according to established protocols, ensuring that all evidence is documented, and allowing the relevant examination authorities to make a determination based on the facts and the university's regulations. Professionals must prioritize adherence to established rules and ethical conduct over personal judgment or external pressures to ensure the integrity of the examination process. Question 8. The analysis reveals that a prospective student applying to the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam has submitted a portfolio that, while demonstrating some creative flair, appears to lack the depth of theoretical understanding typically expected for the program, as outlined in the official admissions guidelines. However, the student's personal statement strongly conveys a passion for the field and a commitment to rigorous study. The admissions committee is tasked with evaluating this application. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound and ethically compliant approach? Option A. Prioritize the student's expressed passion and commitment, assuming that theoretical gaps can be addressed during the course of study, and recommend admission based on potential rather than strictly on current academic demonstration. Option B. Focus solely on the perceived lack of theoretical depth in the portfolio, deeming it insufficient according to the guidelines, and recommend rejection without further consideration of the personal statement or other supporting materials. Option C. Recommend a conditional admission, requiring the student to complete a pre-enrollment preparatory course specifically focused on theoretical foundations, without a full evaluation of the current application against all criteria. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the portfolio and personal statement against all stated evaluation criteria, giving due weight to both demonstrated theoretical understanding and expressed commitment, and seek clarification from the applicant if necessary regarding specific areas of theoretical weakness. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the portfolio and personal statement against all stated evaluation criteria, giving due weight to both demonstrated theoretical understanding and expressed commitment, and seek clarification from the applicant if necessary regarding specific areas of theoretical weakness. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve favorable outcomes in a competitive entrance examination environment. The need for careful judgment arises from the ethical imperative to uphold fairness and the integrity of the examination process, while also acknowledging the aspirations of prospective students. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial review of all submitted materials, adhering strictly to the established evaluation criteria and guidelines set forth by Anhui University of Finance and Economics for its entrance examinations. This approach is justified by the regulatory framework governing university admissions, which mandates transparency, fairness, and merit-based selection. Upholding these principles ensures that all candidates are assessed equitably, preventing any undue advantage or disadvantage based on factors outside of their academic merit and suitability for the program. Adherence to these guidelines is a fundamental ethical obligation for examination administrators. An incorrect approach would be to deviate from the established evaluation criteria to accommodate a candidate based on external pressures or perceived potential, without objective evidence of merit. This failure would violate the regulatory framework by compromising the fairness and impartiality of the selection process. Ethically, it undermines the principle of equal opportunity and could lead to the admission of less qualified candidates, thereby diminishing the academic standards of the university. Another incorrect approach would be to prematurely dismiss a candidate's application based on subjective biases or incomplete information, without a comprehensive review against the defined criteria. This would also contravene the regulatory requirement for a fair and thorough assessment and represent an ethical lapse in professional duty, potentially denying a deserving candidate a place based on prejudice rather than merit. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic adherence to the university's published admission policies and evaluation rubrics. When faced with ambiguity or potential conflicts, professionals should consult with their supervisors or the designated examination committee to ensure decisions are made collectively and in accordance with established protocols. This process emphasizes objectivity, evidence-based assessment, and a commitment to the ethical principles of fairness and integrity in academic admissions. Question 9. System analysis indicates that a review of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam materials has revealed potential ambiguities in the wording of several questions and a slight deviation from the officially published syllabus in one section. The review is being conducted by an internal committee tasked with ensuring the exam's fairness and adherence to university standards. Which of the following approaches best upholds the integrity of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam and its regulatory framework? Option A suggests that the committee focus on the exam's potential impact on the university's national ranking and enrollment figures and adjust the review based on these external factors. Option B advise the committee to overlook minor ambiguities and syllabus deviations, as the overall difficulty and scope of the exam are considered appropriate for assessing candidate potential. Option C recommend immediate revisions to the exam questions and syllabus to align with the identified ambiguities and deviations, prioritizing clarity and syllabus adherence for future exams. Option D document the identified ambiguities and syllabus deviations, and propose a formal review process by the examination board to assess their impact on the exam's validity and fairness, according to the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam guidelines. The correct answer is C. Recommend immediate revisions to the exam questions and syllabus to align with the identified ambiguities and deviations, prioritizing clarity and syllabus adherence for future exams. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve favorable outcomes for the university. The entrance exam is a critical gatekeeper, and any deviation from its established principles can undermine its fairness and the credibility of the institution. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of the examination process, while also considering the broader goals of student recruitment and institutional reputation. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of the examination materials and procedures, focusing solely on adherence to the established guidelines and regulation of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam. This approach prioritizes fairness, transparency, and the consistent application of rules, which are foundational ethical principles in any examination system. Specifically, it aligns with the implicit regulatory framework governing university entrance exams, which mandates impartiality and adherence to prescribed standards. The objective is to identify any procedural irregularities or content issues that might compromise the validity of the exam, without introducing external biases or personal opinions. An incorrect approach would be to focus on the potential impact of any identified issues on the university's ranking or enrollment numbers. This prioritizes external pressures over the core principles of academic integrity and fairness. Such a focus represents a regulatory failure by disregarding the established examination protocols, and an ethical failure by compromising impartiality for perceived institutional benefit. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss potential issues based on the perceived difficulty or complexity of the questions, assuming that challenging content is inherently valid. This fails to acknowledge that even complex questions must adhere to the syllabus and examination guidelines. It represents a failure to critically assess the materials against the defined standards and could lead to the acceptance of inappropriate or unfair examination content. A third incorrect approach would be to proactively suggest modifications to the exam content or format based on anecdotal feedback or personal judgment, without a formal review process. This bypasses the established procedures for exam development and validation, potentially introducing new biases and undermining the standardization of the entrance examination. This constitutes a regulatory failure by deviating from approved examination processes, and an ethical failure by acting outside of one's defined role and authority. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of the examination against the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam-specific regulations and guidelines. This includes verifying that the content aligns with the prescribed syllabus, that the question format is consistent with established practices, and that the examination administration procedures are followed without deviation. Any identified discrepancies should be documented and reported through the appropriate channels for formal review and resolution, ensuring that decisions are based on objective evidence and adherence to the established framework. Question 10. To address the challenge of ensuring a fair and accurate assessment during the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam, a candidate discovers a small, unapproved cheat sheet containing formulas that could be beneficial for a particular section of the exam. The candidate is under significant pressure to perform well. Which of the following actions best upholds the principles of academic integrity and regulatory compliance as expected by Anhui University of Finance and Economics? Option A. Immediately report the discovery of the cheat sheet to the examination proctor and refrain from using it. Option B. Share the cheat sheet with a nearby candidate who appears to be struggling, rationalizing that mutual assistance is acceptable. Option C. Discreetly use the cheat sheet for a few key formulas, believing it will not be noticed and will significantly improve the score. Option D. Attempt to memorize the formulas from the cheat sheet quickly and then discard it, believing this is a form of independent learning. The correct answer is C. Discreetly use the cheat sheet for a few key formulas, believing it will not be noticed and will significantly improve the score. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve favorable outcomes, which can be amplified during university entrance exams. Candidates are expected to demonstrate their genuine understanding and abilities, and any deviation from this principle undermines the fairness and validity of the examination process. The Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam, like any reputable academic institution's assessment, is governed by strict regulations designed to ensure a level playing field and accurate evaluation of candidates' knowledge. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the examination rules and regulations set forth by Anhui University of Finance and Economics. This means completing the exam independently, without any form of external assistance or unauthorized materials. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant with the university's examination guidelines, which are implicitly designed to uphold academic honesty and meritocracy. By acting with integrity, the candidate ensures their results reflect their true capabilities, contributing to a fair assessment and respecting the institution's standards. An incorrect approach would be to seek or utilize unauthorized assistance. This could manifest as consulting notes, communicating with other candidates, or using electronic devices for prohibited purposes. Such actions directly violate the examination regulations of Anhui University of Finance and Economics, which explicitly prohibit any form of cheating or academic dishonesty. Ethically, this constitutes a breach of trust and fairness, devaluing the efforts of honest candidates and the integrity of the examination itself. Legally, it can lead to severe penalties, including disqualification from the exam and potential disciplinary action by the university. Another incorrect approach would be to misrepresent one's identity or qualifications to gain an unfair advantage. This is a serious violation of academic and ethical principles, as well as potentially illegal. It undermines the fundamental purpose of the examination, which is to assess the individual candidate's aptitude and knowledge. The professional decision-making process in such situations should be guided by a strong commitment to ethical conduct and adherence to established rules. Candidates should first understand the examination regulations thoroughly. When faced with a temptation or opportunity to deviate from these rules, they must critically evaluate the potential consequences, both for themselves and for the integrity of the examination process. Prioritizing honesty and fairness, even under pressure, is paramount. If uncertain about any rule, seeking clarification from examination proctors or university officials is the appropriate course of action, rather than making assumptions or taking risks. Question 11. The review process indicates that the admissions committee for the Anhui University of Finance and Economics is considering several applications for the upcoming academic year. One applicant has a slightly lower GPA than the stated minimum, but presents a compelling portfolio of research projects and strong recommendations from respected academics. Another applicant has a perfect GPA but limited extracurricular involvement and a generic personal statement. A third applicant is from a region with historically lower academic performance, but has demonstrated significant improvement and leadership in their local community. The committee is also aware of pressure to meet enrollment targets to secure departmental funding. How should the admissions committee proceed to ensure adherence to the university's admission framework and ethical standards? Option A. Expedite the review process for all applicants to meet enrollment targets quickly, giving less weight to extracurricular activities and personal statements to streamline decision-making. Option B. Prioritize applicants with perfect GPAs to ensure the highest academic caliber, even if their overall application is less compelling, and consider waiving certain requirements for applicants from regions with historically lower academic performance to meet enrollment targets. Option C. Conduct a holistic review of all applicants, carefully weighing academic achievements against demonstrated potential, leadership qualities, and the context of their educational background, while strictly adhering to the university's published admission criteria and seeking to maintain academic rigor. Option D. Focus on applicants who demonstrate the strongest potential for future alumni donations and favor those from well-connected backgrounds to enhance the university's network and financial standing. The correct answer is C. Conduct a holistic review of all applicants, carefully weighing academic achievements against demonstrated potential, leadership qualities, and the context of their educational background, while strictly adhering to the university's published admission criteria and seeking to maintain academic rigor. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's academic integrity standards and the pressure to achieve favorable enrollment figures. The admissions committee must navigate this delicate balance, ensuring that the selection process is fair, transparent, and adheres strictly to the Anhui University of Finance and Economics established admission policies and guidelines. The challenge lies in discerning genuine academic potential from potentially misleading application materials, while also upholding the university's reputation and commitment to admitting qualified candidates. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective evaluation of each applicant's academic record, extracurricular achievements, and personal statements, strictly in accordance with the Anhui University of Finance and Economics published admission criteria. This approach prioritizes meritocracy and adherence to established university regulations, ensuring that all applicants are assessed on a level playing field. The regulatory justification stems from the university's internal policies on admissions, which mandate a comprehensive review process designed to identify candidates who best meet the academic and personal development standards of the institution. Ethically, this approach upholds fairness and transparency, preventing any undue influence or bias from affecting the outcome. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize applicants based on their perceived ability to contribute financially to the university through future alumni donations, or to favor candidates from specific regions or schools without a clear academic rationale. This would violate the university's admission policies, which are designed to select students based on academic merit and potential, not on future financial contributions or arbitrary demographic factors. Such an approach would also be ethically unsound, as it introduces bias and undermines the principle of equal opportunity. Another incorrect approach would be to relax admission standards for certain applicants to meet enrollment targets, thereby compromising the academic rigor and reputation of the university. This directly contravenes the university's commitment to academic excellence and would be a clear violation of its admission regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations requires a commitment to upholding institutional policies and ethical principles. Admissions committees must first thoroughly understand the university's admission framework, including all stated criteria, and any specific guidelines for evaluating applications. They should then apply these criteria consistently and objectively to all candidates. In situations of ambiguity or potential conflict, seeking clarification from senior university officials or the Admissions Oversight Committee is crucial. Maintaining detailed records of the evaluation process for each applicant also provides a transparent audit trail and supports defensibility of decisions. Question 12. What factors determine the most appropriate course of action for an applicant to the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam when they realize they may have inadvertently violated a minor procedural rule during the application submission process? Option A. Attempting to correct the procedural violation independently without informing the examination administration. Option B. Hoping the minor procedural violation goes unnoticed by the examination authorities. Option C. Consulting with peers or online forums for advice on how to handle the situation without official notification. Option D. Proactively and transparently reporting the potential violation to the examination administration and seeking guidance on rectifying the situation. The correct answer is D. Proactively and transparently reporting the potential violation to the examination administration and seeking guidance on rectifying the situation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination regulations, specifically concerning the ethical conduct and academic integrity expected of prospective students. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate response when faced with a situation that could be interpreted as a violation of examination rules, necessitating a judgment call that balances honesty with adherence to established guidelines. Careful judgment is required to avoid misinterpreting the rules or acting in a way that could jeopardize the application. The correct approach involves proactively and transparently disclosing the potential issue to the examination authorities. This demonstrates a commitment to academic integrity and respect for the examination process. By admitting the possibility of a rule violation and seeking clarification or guidance, the applicant signals honesty and a willingness to comply with the university standards. This aligns with the overarching regulatory framework of university entrance exams, which prioritizes fairness, integrity, and the prevention of academic misconduct. The specific guidelines for the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam would likely emphasize the importance of truthful self-reporting and adherence to all stated rules. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the potential issue and hope it goes unnoticed. This is a failure of academic integrity and a direct violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of examination regulations that expect candidates to be fully compliant. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to conceal the issue or provide misleading information. This constitutes academic dishonesty and would likely lead to disqualification and potential future repercussions. A third incorrect approach is to seek advice from unauthorized sources or to interpret the rules in a self-serving manner without consulting the official examination body. This demonstrates a lack of respect for the established regulatory framework and a failure to engage with the process responsibly. Professionals in similar situations should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, honesty, and adherence to established rules. This involves thoroughly understanding the relevant regulations, assessing the situation objectively, and proactively seeking clarification from the appropriate authorities when uncertainty exists. The guiding principle should always be to uphold academic integrity and to act in a manner that reflects a commitment to ethical conduct. Question 13. Benchmark analysis indicates that a student, having recently taken the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam, approaches a current applicant and asks for tips on the exam, specifically inquiring about the types of questions that appeared in the mathematics section. The student implies they are willing to share some details if the current applicant is struggling with quantitative reasoning. Considering the regulatory framework of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam, which strictly prohibits the disclosure of examination content, what is the most appropriate course of action for the current applicant? Option A. Suggests that the student who took the exam should report any perceived irregularities to the examination authorities instead of discussing it with other applicants. Option B. Agree to a brief, discreet conversation to share a few general themes from the mathematics section, emphasizing that it's not direct question recall. Option C. politely declined to discuss the exam content, stating that discussing specific questions or types of questions is against the examination rules and could jeopardize the integrity of the process. Option D. Offer general study advice for quantitative reasoning without revealing any specific details about the actual exam questions. The correct answer is C. Politely declined to discuss the exam content, stating that discussing specific questions or types of questions is against the examination rules and could jeopardize the integrity of the process. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve favorable outcomes in a competitive entrance examination environment. The need for careful judgment arises from the ethical imperative to uphold fairness and the integrity of the examination process, while also acknowledging the aspirations of candidates. The regulatory framework for the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam, as per its established guidelines, strictly prohibits any form of academic misconduct, including the dissemination of examination content. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the examination regulations by refusing to provide any information about the exam content, even in a disguised or indirect manner. This aligns with the core principles of academic integrity and the specific rules governing the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam, which are designed to ensure a level playing field for all applicants. Upholding these regulations is paramount to maintaining the credibility of the university and the fairness of its admissions process. Providing information about the examination content, even if seemingly innocuous or disguised, constitutes a serious breach of academic ethics and the specific regulations of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam. This action undermines the fairness of the examination by giving an unfair advantage to certain individuals, thereby compromising the merit-based selection process. Such behavior can lead to severe disciplinary actions, including disqualification from the examination and potential blacklisting from future academic pursuits. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Recognizing the ethical dilemma and the potential consequences of any action. 2. Consulting the specific rules and regulations of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam to understand the boundaries of acceptable behavior. 3. Prioritizing adherence to these regulations above any perceived pressure or personal inclination. 4. Communicating a clear and firm refusal to engage in any activity that violates the examination's integrity, citing the relevant regulations. Question 14. The evaluation methodology shows a reliance on qualitative assessments of applicant essays, which, while intended to gauge critical thinking, may be susceptible to unconscious bias from the evaluators. Considering the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam's commitment to meritocratic selection, which of the following actions best upholds the integrity of the examination process? Option A. Introduce a new essay topic that is significantly more complex, believing that this will inherently filter out less capable candidates and reduce the impact of individual evaluator judgment. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the essay evaluation rubric to identify and mitigate potential sources of subjective interpretation and implement blind grading where feasible to minimize evaluator bias. Option C. Continue with the current essay evaluation process, assuming that the evaluators are sufficiently trained to avoid bias, as the methodology has been in place for several years without formal complaints. Option D. Increase the weighting of the essay component in the overall score, arguing that this will give more prominence to qualitative assessment and thus better reflect the applicant's potential. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the essay evaluation rubric to identify and mitigate potential sources of subjective interpretation and implement blind grading where feasible to minimize evaluator bias. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's established evaluation methodology and the potential for bias in its application. The need for objective assessment in entrance examinations is paramount to ensure fairness and meritocracy, which are foundational principles of academic integrity. The challenge lies in identifying and mitigating any factors that could compromise this objectivity, even if they are not explicitly prohibited by the current regulations. Careful judgment is required to uphold the spirit of the evaluation process, not just its letter. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the existing evaluation methodology to identify any potential areas of subjectivity or implicit bias that could lead to unfair outcomes. This requires a deep understanding of the principles of fair assessment and an awareness of how subtle factors can influence judgment. By proactively seeking to refine the methodology based on principles of fairness and transparency, the university demonstrates a commitment to upholding the integrity of its entrance examination. This aligns with the overarching goal of academic institutions to select candidates based on their genuine abilities and potential, free from undue influence. The regulatory framework for university entrance exams in China, while not explicitly detailed here, generally emphasizes fairness, transparency, and merit-based selection. Any methodology that deviates from these principles, even without direct contravention of a specific rule, would be professionally unsound. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss concerns about potential bias simply because the current methodology has not been formally challenged or amended. This demonstrates a lack of proactive engagement with the principles of fair assessment and a failure to anticipate potential issues. It risks perpetuating unfairness and undermining the credibility of the examination process. Another incorrect approach would be to implement superficial changes that do not address the root cause of potential bias. For instance, merely rephrasing existing criteria without fundamentally altering the assessment process would be insufficient. This approach fails to demonstrate a genuine commitment to improving fairness and may be seen as a cosmetic fix rather than a substantive improvement. Professionals tasked with designing and overseeing university entrance examinations should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes fairness, objectivity, and continuous improvement. This involves 1. Understanding the core principles of fair assessment and the specific regulatory context. 2. Proactively identifying potential sources of bias or subjectivity within existing methodologies. 3. Engaging in critical self-reflection and seeking feedback to refine evaluation processes. 4. Ensuring transparency in the methodology and its application. 5. Being prepared to adapt and evolve the methodology to meet evolving standards of academic integrity and fairness. Question 15. Quality control measures reveal inconsistencies in the documentation verification process for applicants to the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination, potentially impacting the fairness of the selection. Which of the following actions best aligns with the absolute priority of adhering solely to the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines specified for this exam? Option A. Focus on meeting the overall admission quota for the year, assuming the identified documentation inconsistencies are minor and unlikely to significantly affect the final selection outcomes. Option B. Expedite the remaining admissions by relaxing some documentation checks to meet the university's admission targets, while planning to address the inconsistencies in future admission cycles. Option C. Immediately halt the admission process and conduct a comprehensive review of all documentation verification procedures against the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination regulations to identify and rectify all discrepancies. Option D. Implement minor, informal adjustments to the documentation verification process based on the quality control team's immediate suggestions to speed up admissions. The correct answer is C. Immediately halt the admission process and conduct a comprehensive review of all documentation verification procedures against the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination regulations to identify and rectify all discrepancies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for efficient student admission processes with the imperative to uphold fairness and transparency, as mandated by Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination regulations. The pressure to meet admission targets can create an environment where shortcuts are tempting, but adherence to established procedures is paramount to prevent bias and ensure the integrity of the selection process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the admission process against the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination guidelines. This means meticulously checking each stage, from application verification to final selection, to ensure compliance with all stipulated rules regarding eligibility, documentation, and scoring. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the quality control findings by adhering to the university's specific regulatory framework, which is the absolute priority for this exam. It ensures that any identified deviations are rectified in accordance with the established legal and procedural standards of the university, thereby maintaining fairness and preventing any form of discrimination or procedural impropriety. Incorrect approaches analysis, an approach that focuses solely on expediting the remaining admissions without a thorough review of the identified quality control issues, is incorrect. This fails to address the root cause of the quality control findings and risks perpetuating any existing procedural flaws or biases, violating the principle of fairness and the university's regulatory framework. An approach that involves making ad hoc adjustments to the admission criteria based on the quality control findings without consulting or adhering to the established amendment procedures within the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination regulations is also incorrect. Such actions would bypass the formal governance and regulatory oversight, leading to an arbitrary and potentially unfair admission process. An approach that prioritizes meeting admission quotas over ensuring the integrity and fairness of the selection process, as dictated by the university's guidelines, is fundamentally flawed. This demonstrates a disregard for the regulatory framework and ethical considerations of the entrance examination. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such quality control issues must first refer to the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination regulations. The decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the specific nature of the quality control findings. 2. Consulting the relevant sections of the university's entrance examination regulations to identify the precise rules that may have been compromised. 3. Developing a corrective action plan that directly addresses the findings and realigns the process with the regulatory requirements. 4. Implementing the corrective actions and conducting a follow-up review to confirm compliance. This systematic, regulation-driven approach ensures that decisions are grounded in established legal and ethical standards, safeguarding the integrity of the examination. Question 16. The performance metrics show a slight but consistent underperformance in a specific section across a cohort of applicants for the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure adherence to the university's examination regulations? Option A. Rely on the subjective assessment of the admissions committee to determine if the underperformance is significant enough to warrant concern, based on their general experience with past applicants. Option B. Recommend a supplementary, non-standardized assessment for the underperforming cohort to gauge their understanding outside the formal examination structure, without consulting the official exam regulations. Option C. Immediately flag the cohort for potential disqualification due to the observed underperformance, as this may indicate a lack of preparedness for the rigorous academic standards of the university. Option D. Conduct a detailed comparative analysis of the underperforming cohort's metrics against the established benchmarks and historical data for that section, as outlined in the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam guidelines, to identify any systemic issues or anomalies before considering further steps. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed comparative analysis of the underperforming cohort's metrics against the established benchmarks and historical data for that section, as outlined in the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam guidelines, to identify any systemic issues or anomalies before considering further steps. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's academic integrity with the practicalities of student performance evaluation, all within the specific regulatory framework of Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exams. The challenge lies in interpreting performance metrics that might indicate a need for intervention without overstepping the bounds of established examination guidelines or unfairly penalizing students. Careful judgment is required to ensure fairness, adherence to regulations, and the ultimate goal of selecting qualified candidates. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the performance metrics against the established criteria for the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam. This approach is right because it directly addresses the observed metrics by comparing them to the university's official assessment guidelines and admission standards. It prioritizes a data-driven and rule-based evaluation, ensuring that any decisions are grounded in the specific regulations governing the entrance examination. This aligns with the principle of academic fairness and adherence to institutional policy, which are paramount in university admissions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on anecdotal evidence or personal judgment without reference to the official metrics and guidelines would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to uphold the regulatory framework of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam, which mandates objective evaluation based on defined criteria. Another incorrect approach that involves immediate disqualification based on a single metric, without considering the holistic performance or potential mitigating factors allowed by the exam regulations, would also be a failure. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the comprehensive nature of the entrance examination process as defined by the university. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam's regulatory framework. This involves identifying the specific performance indicators, their weighting, and the thresholds for acceptable performance. The next step is to objectively assess the observed metrics against these established criteria. If the metrics suggest a deviation, the professional should consult the relevant university policies for guidance on further investigation or action. This process ensures that decisions are fair, consistent, and compliant with the specific rules of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination. Question 17. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a prospective student preparing for the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination should prioritize identifying potential challenges to their academic success. Which of the following approaches best reflects a comprehensive and contextually appropriate risk assessment for this specific examination? Option A. Systematically identifying potential risks to examination performance, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and developing targeted mitigation strategies based on the off-entrance exam syllabus and known assessment criteria. Option B. Listing potential risks without developing concrete plans to address them, assuming that awareness of the risks is sufficient for effective preparation. Option C. Applying general risk management principles learned from various sources without specific consideration for the unique regulatory framework and content of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam. Option D. Focusing primarily on external factors such as the overall competitiveness of the applicant pool and the perceived difficulty of the examination, while overlooking personal study habits and knowledge gaps. The correct answer is A. Systematically identifying potential risks to examination performance, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and developing targeted mitigation strategies based on the off-entrance exam syllabus and known assessment criteria. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge for a prospective student at Anhui University of Finance and Economics, OFF, as they navigate the entrance examination process. The core difficulty lies in accurately interpreting and applying the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines mandated for the off-entrance exam, particularly concerning risk assessment in their academic preparation. Failure to adhere strictly to these specified guidelines, even with good intentions, can lead to disqualification or a disadvantage in the examination. The student must demonstrate not only knowledge of risk assessment principles, but also the ability to contextualize them within the unique requirements of the off-entrance exam. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic identification of potential risks to successful examination performance, followed by an evaluation of their likelihood and impact, and finally, the development of mitigation strategies. This aligns with the fundamental principles of risk assessment, which are implicitly expected to be understood and applied by candidates in their preparation for a rigorous academic program at OFF. Specifically, the approach should focus on risks directly related to the examination content, format, and the candidate's own preparedness, all within the scope of off-stated examination objectives and syllabus. This methodical process ensures that preparation is targeted and efficient, addressing potential weaknesses before they manifest as examination failures. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves broadly applying generic risk assessment methodologies without considering the specific context of the off-entrance exam. This fails to acknowledge that the exam has its own unique set of requirements and potential pitfalls, which may not be covered by general risk assessment frameworks. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the exam's specific jurisdiction and its particular demands. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on external factors beyond the candidate's control, such as the perceived difficulty of the exam or the performance of other candidates. While external factors can influence outcomes, a proper risk assessment for an entrance exam should prioritize internal factors that the candidate can actively manage and mitigate, such as study habits, understanding of the syllabus, and test-taking strategies. Overemphasis on uncontrollable external risks indicates a misapplication of risk assessment principles in this context. A third incorrect approach is to neglect the development of specific mitigation strategies after identifying risks. Simply identifying potential problems without planning how to address them renders the risk assessment process incomplete and ineffective. This approach fails to translate the assessment into actionable steps for improvement, which is a crucial outcome of any practical risk assessment. Professional reasoning. Professionals preparing for high-stakes assessment, such as university entrance exams, should adopt a structured and context-specific approach to risk assessment. This involves 1. Understanding the specific requirements and scope of the assessment, in this case, the off-entrance exam regulations and syllabus. 2. Identifying potential risks that are relevant to the assessment's objectives and the candidate's preparation. 3. Evaluating the likelihood and potential impact of each identified risk. 4. Developing concrete and actionable mitigation strategies for the most significant risks. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment as preparation progresses. This systematic process ensures a focused and effective approach to achieving success. Question 18. Governance review demonstrates that a candidate for the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam has inadvertently overheard another applicant discussing specific, previously undisclosed exam content with a third party. The candidate overhears phrases that strongly suggest the third party has access to leaked examination materials. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action for the candidate who overheard this conversation? Option A. Immediately report the overheard conversation and suspected leak to the Anhui University of Finance and Economics Examination Administration without engaging with the other applicant. Option B. Approach the applicant who was overheard and confront them about their suspected possession of leaked materials. Option C. Discreetly use the overheard phrases as a mental checklist to gauge their own preparedness on those specific topics during the exam. Option D. Ignore the conversation, as it does not directly involve the candidate, and proceed with the exam to focus on their own performance. The correct answer is A. Immediately report the overheard conversation and suspected leak to the Anhui University of Finance and Economics Examination Administration without engaging with the other applicant. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire to excel and the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair assessment. The pressure to perform well in a competitive entrance exam, coupled with the availability of potentially compromised information, creates an ethical tightrope. The professional challenge lies in navigating this situation without violating the principles of honesty, fairness, and adherence to the Anhui University of Finance and Economics examination regulations. The correct approach involves prioritizing academic integrity and reporting the suspected breach of examination security. This aligns with the core ethical principles of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam framework, which implicitly or explicitly mandates honesty and fairness in all examination processes. By reporting the issue, the student upholds the integrity of the examination system, ensuring a level playing field for all candidates and safeguarding the reputation of the university. This action is ethically justifiable as it prevents potential unfair advantages and upholds the value of genuine academic achievement. An incorrect approach of ignoring the information and proceeding with the exam without reporting it is ethically flawed because it tacitly condones potential academic misconduct. This inaction could lead to an unfair advantage for the student who possesses the information, undermining the meritocratic principles of the entrance examination. It also fails to uphold the student's responsibility to contribute to a fair and honest academic environment. Another incorrect approach of confronting the individual directly without involving university authorities is problematic. While seemingly proactive, it bypasses the established procedures for handling academic integrity issues. This could lead to an escalation of the situation, potential personal conflict, and may not result in a proper investigation or resolution according to the university's regulations. It also places the student in a position of judgment and enforcement that is not their designated role. A further incorrect approach of using the information to gain an advantage in the exam, even if the information is not directly shared, is a clear violation of academic integrity. This constitutes cheating, as it relies on an unfair and unauthorized source of knowledge, thereby compromising the validity of the examination results and the student's own academic standing. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's examination regulations and ethical guidelines. When faced with a potential breach of integrity, the first step is to assess the situation objectively. The next step is to consult the relevant university policies on academic misconduct and reporting procedures. The most appropriate action is to report the suspected breach to the designated university authority, such as the examination board or admissions office, allowing them to conduct a thorough investigation and take appropriate action. This ensures that the situation is handled impartially and in accordance with established protocols, preserving the integrity of the examination process. Question 19. Process analysis reveals that a candidate preparing for the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam has encountered a complex theoretical question related to economic principles. The candidate is unsure of the precise answer, but recalls a similar concept discussed in a study group session where a peer shared a specific interpretation. The candidate has access to their personal notes, which were compiled from various sources including lectures and group discussions. Considering the strict adherence required by the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam regulations, which of the following actions best reflects the ethically and procedurally correct approach for the candidate? Option A. Attempting to recall the peer's exact phrasing from the study group discussion and incorporating it into their answer, assuming it represents a valid interpretation. Option B. Discreetly referencing their personal notes to find the specific interpretation shared by their peer in the study group, believing it might be the intended answer. Option C. Relying solely on their own understanding and memory of the economic principles, even if uncertain, to formulate an answer based on their independent study and lecture notes. Option D. Seeking clarification from a proctor during the exam regarding the specific economic principle, even if it means potentially delaying their answer. The correct answer is C. Relying solely on their own understanding and memory of the economic principles, even if uncertain, to formulate an answer based on their independent study and lecture notes. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to achieve favorable outcomes in a competitive entrance examination environment. The candidate's actions, if they involve any form of academic dishonesty, directly contravene the principles of fairness and meritocracy that underpin university admissions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the examination process remains a true reflection of a candidate's abilities and knowledge, free from undue influence or deception. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the examination regulations and guidelines set forth by Anhui University of Finance and Economics. This means the candidate must rely solely on their own knowledge and understanding to answer the questions, without recourse to any external aids or unauthorized assistance. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant with the examination's stipulated rules, upholding the integrity of the admission process. It aligns with the university's commitment to selecting candidates based on genuine academic merit. An incorrect approach would be to seek or utilize any form of unauthorized assistance, such as consulting external resources during the exam or colluding with others. Such actions constitute academic misconduct, violating the explicit rules of the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance exam. This would not only lead to disqualification from the examination, but also damage the candidate's reputation and future academic prospects. Another incorrect approach would be to misrepresent one's qualifications or background to gain an unfair advantage, which is a form of deception and a breach of trust. Professionals in examination administration and candidates alike should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes honesty, fairness, and adherence to established rules. This involves understanding the examination's specific regulations thoroughly, recognizing the ethical implications of one's actions, and making choices that uphold the integrity of the academic process. When faced with ambiguity or pressure, the default should always be to err on the side of caution and strict compliance with the stated rules. Question 20. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential for inconsistencies in the data submitted by various departments for the Anhui University of Finance and Economics entrance examination evaluation. The university's reputation and ranking are heavily influenced by the accuracy of this data. Which of the following actions best addresses this risk while upholding academic integrity and regulatory compliance? Option A. Delegate the entire data verification responsibility to a single junior staff member to streamline the process, without providing specific verification protocols. Option B. Rely on the self-reported data from each department, assuming their internal checks are sufficient, and expedite the submission process to meet the deadline. Option C. Implement a rigorous cross-verification process for all submitted data, comparing it against original source documents and requiring departmental sign-off on final verified figures before submission. Option D. Focus on submitting only the most favorable data points that showcase the university's strengths, while downplaying or omitting any data that might reflect negatively. The correct answer is C. Implement a rigorous cross-verification process for all submitted data, comparing it against original source documents and requiring departmental sign-off on final verified figures before submission. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's academic integrity with the ethical obligations of its faculty and staff. The pressure to achieve high rankings and attract top talent can create an environment where shortcuts or misrepresentations might be considered, even if unintentional. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all data submitted for evaluation is accurate, complete, and presented in a manner that reflects genuine achievements without exaggeration. The correct approach involves a thorough and systematic review of all submitted data, cross-referencing with original sources, and seeking clarification from departments or individuals responsible for generating the information. This approach aligns with the principles of academic honesty and the ethical guidelines expected of educational institutions. Specifically, it upholds the integrity of the university's reporting and ensures compliance with any stated or implied regulations regarding data submission for entrance exams and university evaluations. This systematic verification process is crucial for maintaining trust with prospective students, current students, and regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach that involves accepting departmental self-reported data without independent verification fails to uphold the principle of due diligence. This could lead to the submission of inaccurate information, potentially violating internal university policies on data integrity and external regulations governing university admissions and rankings. Another incorrect approach, which prioritizes speed of submission over accuracy, directly contravenes the ethical imperative to provide truthful and reliable information. This haste can mask underlying data quality issues and expose the university to reputational damage and potential sanctions if inaccuracies are later discovered. A third incorrect approach, which involves selectively presenting data to highlight strengths while omitting weaknesses, constitutes a form of misrepresentation. This is ethically unsound and undermines the transparency expected in academic reporting. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes accuracy, transparency, and adherence to established guidelines. This involves 1. Understanding the specific reporting requirements and the purpose of the data submission. 2. Establishing clear internal procedures for data collection, verification, and approval. 3. Fostering a culture of accountability where individuals understand their role in ensuring data integrity. 4. Implementing a multi-stage review process involving both data originators and independent reviewers. 5. Maintaining thorough documentation of the data collection and verification process.